Did you ever make anything happen? Anything you couldn't explain? You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm a what?
Welcome to our movie show. We're looking back at Harry Potter, the very first one. We're going to be going through every film in the series, seeing how it holds up in 2017. Our thoughts on it now. I'm Matt Fava. You can find me at a 90s Kid on Twitter at GameThinkTalk, and this is...
I'm Matthew Owen. You can also find me on 90s Kid at Super Gamecast 64. That's my gaming podcast.
And we've got Hermione next to us. Hey there, Hermione. Let's talk about this film going forward. I'll tell you what, when I first watched these movie franchise, this series, I was a big fan of the books. I'd sort of caught on around like the Prisoner of Azkaban time because I like burned through the first two, then was eagerly grabbed Azkaban from the library and then was waiting for Goblet of Fire to come out. So I watched the movies and I remember thinking back that the first two were sort of a good classic look on it. I loved Alfonso Cuarón's darker side, and then I think they kind of fell off and came back around. So going back to this one, I think it held up pretty well. I think that in a nutshell, This movie is like a Indiana Jones for kids. They really toe the line of adventure, a little bit of horror. They go sort of surprisingly just as close to like it being more of an adult movie. I don't mean erotic, but more like genuine horror and death, but not going over that line where it would scare a kid. But I don't think they pulled too many punches.
I think Harry Potter 1 is a really, really accurate representation. The movie, at least, is a very accurate representation of kind of the hype when it started. Harry Potter, we all grew up with the books, so of course you're going to see the later ones getting into much more adult themes and truly dealing with things like, tragedy and death. But one, Christopher Columbus did a very good thing in really embracing the adventure. I think when we go into... Yeah, when we go in to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, I think the movie really assumes that you have not read the books. They were trying to make this a film series that could stand alone from the books. And as it continued, we saw, obvious changes. But the first one does a really good job, like you said, capturing that classic adventure movie feel, but instilling a lot of morals at the same time, but building a base for these characters to grow. And it was a movie that not only appeased to children, but like you said, had some very true action scenes with high stakes, especially of stuff towards the end, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Those things, like any good movie that you might have seen in the 80s, like the mid-80s, before we saw that PG-13 rating, something that truly toes the line, that it's not just for kids. Kids might be scared by some points, but it's part of the experience. It's much like a reflection of entering a big old school full of tons of things you don't know. Of course, some of it's going to be scary. Not all of it's going to be happy-go-lucky. So I think they did a really, really good job balancing that classic Hollywood adaptation feel with a truly invigorating story, even for those who didn't read the books.
Yeah, I feel like the beginning section, the lit suburban streets, the sort of everything is normal with a magical element to it, felt very Steven Spielberg to me in the beginning. I think this movie works really well because it focuses on the introduction of the characters. It doesn't have to find something new for them to do. And I think that works really well for a movie format because you can spend the first quarter of the movie introducing the characters and really telling the story of Harry really well, and then introducing the castle, all the teachers, Hagrid, everything. And then they did a really good job of sort of cherry picking enough elements from the story and stringing together pretty often at times exciting story, enough action. I felt like there were still some moments that ended up maybe dragging a bit, and I think that a big problem with adapting a book is, and this is something that the later movies really struggled with because the books were bigger, is that they were so obsessed with nailing every character in the book. So what you ended up with all these little tiny, here's one shot, oh, there's that kid from the book, here's that, but nothing really tied together. I feel like Columbus not only discovered America, but managed to string this together and make it actually feel like a movie. And there were only a few moments where I felt like, oh, that was there just because it was in the book.
And I will bring that, at that point I agree with very much. If you look at Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone as it is, it's very much a self-contained movie. It has its own story. And once it wraps up, it wraps up. Comparing that to something like Goblet of Fire, which we'll talk about in a few weeks, that does not exist as its own film. It purely exists as a bridge between other films and to fill in the blanks. But Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, for all its flaws and things that it does well, it's very much a story that even if you say, I don't want to continue with the Harry Potter train, you do have his first year complete, and it feels like an accurate, kind of collection of the events that happened in the book. And like you said, it does a very good job not trying to shove a lot of action down your throat. That Steven Spielberg kind of feel, I feel it totally helps, because if you start Harry Potter, especially in 2001, right out of the gate, super magical and super crazy, you're going to lose that human feeling. And I think by starting off the series, not only with kids, true kids,
yes,
Harry, Ron, Hermione, these actors were they vetted a bunch of different actors. They wanted to get a group of kids that they could grow up with. You have that human connection with the characters because they're true kids, and they're not trying to throw a bunch of special effects or anything at you. At its base, the original Harry Potter, when you take away all of the frivolous, magic and the giant three-headed dogs and stuff, it's really about a kid finding his true calling in life, and then finding out that maybe that which he wanted so bad was more than he could ever ask for. It's a fish out of water story, but it happens to be surrounded with literal magic, which I think does so much. You look at kids' movies nowadays, and they're trying to do those kind of same stories, but they lack the kind of emotional punch that you see from the camaraderie with friends. I know you specifically, we've talked about this several times, the favorite part of Harry Potter movies for you is not the action, but the friendship and the bonding. And I would say that the first Harry Potter, although it's very juvenile, and I don't mean that as an insult, it's a childlike kind of friendship bonding. I feel like that's one of the main movies where they spend much more time focusing on the kids talking to each other and sharing ideas rather than giant wand fights. So in that, I guess, what was your I don't want to go right off the bat and make you think off the top of your head a favorite scene, but who did you gravitate towards out of all of the different characters? Because we do introduce a bunch of characters. Did you find yourself gravitating towards learning all the professors? Did you really enjoy the kids themselves? Learning their magical powers. Did you like things with Hagrid and the Forbidden Forest? Because there's a lot of lore.
By far, my favorite depictions of the characters were the Dursleys. I laughed out loud several times from the dad and the son, because they're cast so well, and they really they abuse that kid. The way they just shove him out of the way, throw him down. He's living this slave's life, and they play it a bit for laughs, but they also play it really seriously. It's almost sort of disturbing in a way, the way they treat this kid. And this is a commonly successful trope to do in a kids movie, is to make them feel like, no, don't worry, you're actually special. But I think what J.K. Rowling did really well, and what they captured in this movie, is Harry wasn't just a kid who got picked on. I mean, he was the least important kid in the world. He didn't have parents. He had a family who hated him. He lived under the stairs. He was a slave. I love that. Yeah. I love the gigantic clothes that he wears coming up. But it's done very tastefully in the way that they could have made it look too ridiculous, but it managed to I was bought into that sort of magical world of it. And then for him, when he finally realizes he is the special wizard, even though I'm 32 and had already read this book and knew it was going to happen, I still was hit with that rush of yeah, he is special. Somebody cares about him.
Well, and that's I think a lot of that beginning movie and the impact of that, that classic line, "You're a wizard, Harry." Yeah. That line by itself, and the introduction of Hagrid, it's nothing if it's not backed by emotion. And I think that Christopher Columbus and the screenwriters, they did a great job really showing how shitty the Dursleys were. A lot of that, I feel, it has to go to Fiona Shaw. She played Aunt Petunia.
Perfect casting.
Richard Griffiths, who played Uncle Vernon.
Perfect.
They're slightly different from the book, but what these actors and the screenplay itself was able to do was really bring out, not that these were vicious people, but it's that old adage I'm not mad at you, son, I'm just disappointed. It felt like at all times, both Petunia and Dursley himself, the big Dursley, he they didn't care for Potter. They don't care. He's just a kid. They throw him under like you said, they throw him under the cupboard under the stairs like he's some pantry, like he's just some crap or a broom to put away. And that all builds up. And then when, Hagrid finally says, "You're a wizard, Harry," it's that whole rush of like acceptance. Like you said, someone finally cares. And I think if for any reason Fiona Shaw and Richard Griffiths dropped their ball on the role, or the Dursleys weren't written as well as they were for this film, the whole entire fact that Harry's a wizard would just be like, oh, a cool thing happened to that nice kid.
Yeah. But
the impact of him really, and that extends throughout the whole entire movie, because for everything we know about this kid, Harry, he's lived like this for his entire life, feeling unloved, not knowing truly about what happened with his parents, and then the feeling of acceptance pulls yourself through the entire Hogwarts experience. You're living vicariously through Harry, and you feel his same emotion. So his wonder and his bewilderment and all the magical things going around him is even more powerful, because he's never seen anything even nearly as close to that magical. Even some of the things that kids like his age would see, he's just been kept in a cupboard. So yeah, right. I think that opening with the Dursleys just cements the emotion that was required to go through the whole entire adventure.
Yeah, and I mean, so much of that comes from the setup of the book, but they definitely they spent enough time in the beginning to really nail that down. So let's talk about the casting. These kids were really young because they didn't want to have, they knew it was going to take close to 10 years to get this whole series out, and it did take 10 years. So they had to start young. Emma Watson was 10, Radcliffe was 11, and Rupert Grint was 12. I thought Rupert Grint was the most...
I thought it would have been like 9.
Well, I don't know. Maybe he was 9 5/4 or something, which would make him.
No, I'm saying I thought that Ron was the youngest of the group.
Oh yeah, no, he was the oldest one.
When I'm looking at it,
and I always liked his performance the best. I thought he was the most believable. I thought Watson did a good job at the time. It did. A lot of times it looked like she took a huge breath, looked at the lines in her head, and sort of spat it out. You could sort of watch her act. She's 11. What are you going to expect? I thought Radcliffe was the Keanu Reeves of child actors. He seemed to...
It's so true.
His main acting style was, I'm going to open my mouth, and that means I'm surprised. And then when he's supposed to be happy, he puts his teeth together and just kind of goes...
Yeah. He's a caricature of an actor.
Like, I don't think he learned how to smile until maybe the last movie, going off memory. So I thought he grew into it, but it's a bit distracting, but... It didn't ruin the movie, but you could tell these were kids, and this was some of their first roles.
I think that Radcliffe, Radcliffe, he was a child actor, and he wasn't a great child actor. Let's just, on the table, as an actor, he didn't really find his comfort in the role until I would say 5 or 6. 5 is when, and thank God, because the later movies really, really rely on Harry to bring the emotional punch. And when it comes to Hermione, and like you said, how she kind of internalizes her thoughts and then delivers, as I watch some of the later movies and listen to the audiobooks, because I'm also listening and reading the books.
Which narrator?
Hermione,
Stephen Fry?
Stephen Fry, all the way. I love me some Stephen Fry. Hermione is written much more shrewd. She's very much a know-it-all in the books. Yeah. And I feel like in the films, oftentimes, especially looking at Goblet of Fire, in comparison to like 1, 2, and 3, they try to change her character so she wasn't so know-it-all, so book smart, so annoying in the way that she delivered her lines. And I feel like as a child, you have multiple different directors doing the films, and Christopher Columbus probably just told her, do what you want. And when you give a kid actor a bunch, like a huge book, and they read through and they see how their character's supposed to act, I could see her trying to struggle to internalize how to deliver those lines when she's such a, not a brat, but Hermione is such a know-it-all. She shoves her face in so much business in the books where she oftentimes is just throwing out her 2 cents, whereas Hermione in the films is more reserved. She's more of a supporting character. I felt like Ron, out of the 3, when it comes to book to movie comparison, and Rupert Grint's performance always knocked me out of the park. I feel like that kid had it from day one.
Yeah.
I feel like he does the best kind of culmination of both the book and the movie character, and truly makes a Ron of his own. But I have to say that I've seen Rupert Grint in several things since he left Harry Potter. Most notably, my favorite was the Necessary Death of Charlie Countryman, which was an indie film that also featured, believe it or not, Shia LaBeouf. But he's got some acting chops, and I feel like when all is said and done, Radcliffe wasn't an actor when he started Potter. Watson wanted to be and was working on it, but Grint was really the one who had some chops. Mm-hmm. And I guess now that you say he was the oldest, maybe those 2 years of experience really did make the difference, because you see Watson really grow towards 2 and 3.
Sure. I think it's interesting about the characterization. Yeah, I think they wanted to make Hermione in these films a bit more likable. They didn't want her to, they wanted her knowledge to be always a positive. I mean, that one scene where they have Rupert Grint walking and he says, "Oh, she's so impossible or like mental or something," and then Hermione runs past and hits him with the books. I feel like that one that suffered a little bit in the translation to the movie. It felt a bit forced. But they had her. I mean, she ends up being a large part. Like, they couldn't have done it without her because she has that knowledge near the end of it. So they wanted her to be more likable. Rupert Grint, I agree with you. I loved his portrayal and his acting. I feel like Harry in the books was a little bit more of an arrogant dick. He got really used to being, I'm the guy who killed Voldemort, and I don't think Radcliffe ever quite had that swagger. But in this movie, he was just all wonder, and he stood there with an open mouthed owl. One thing I liked about this movie was the effects. I think the first half of the movie, there's a lot of great practical effects, and I was surprised. I'm like, this is great. This feels like a 80s 90s movie before CGI came in. And
that Spielberg feel.
Yeah, like a flying motorcycle that just looks like a motorcycle. You know, they probably used wires or whatever and took it out. And for the most part, they stick with the practical effects, and it's done really well. They end up using CGI for the three-headed dog, for
the troll scene.
Yeah, the troll, which, you know, it didn't
it
look
works,
bad.
But it doesn't work at both points. It feels dated, which to that point, like you said, with the motorcycle, practical effects, and that's why I was so into practical effects back then, and I'm still into practical effects, because if they look good, they age well. CGI will get better over time, and that's specifically, I mean, I liked Fluffy, the three-headed dog, and I especially liked that they used a lot of practical effects for that whole ending, you know, when he's actually trying to go get the Sorcerer's Stone.
The chess pieces looked amazing, and you could really feel, like something like that needs to feel so large, even though it's not moving fast, could kill you. Going practical effects and building those things and like smashing them and letting them crumble was just like very visceral.
There's actually something I want to bring up, speaking about that end sequence, because in the book they have almost the exact same set of challenges. You know, the Devil's Snare, which they changed a little bit to make light for the movie. You know, they changed the Devil's Snare so it's weak to light, easy. All right, and that's kind of a one-off. That's really Hermione's main thing in that end trial sequence. She goes, "Oh, Devil's Snare, just relax and then you're good." But, you know, she's smart. She read out of a book. Then you have this giant display of Harry with his broomstick. He gets a really cool thing. And then you have Ron with his ability to play the chess piece. In the book, they have another trial in which Hermione needs to solve a riddle to figure out which piece or which pot has poison in it and which one is safe to drink, and they have to drink either a poisonous or non-poisonous potion to continue. Now, I know that would not translate to a movie. You know, just having Hermione stand there and go, "Let me figure out this puzzle for a minute," doesn't make for good TV, one could say. But I felt like they kind of missed the point, and I feel like Hermione almost got snubbed, because when I listened and read the book, I feel like Hermione felt like one of the three. Right. Very, very much so. And in the movie, it almost felt like him and Ron could have done it with Neville if they really wanted to, or somebody who knew something about Devil's Snare. I think they kind of laxed on Hermione's intelligence a bit too much in favor of her being likable. I like where her character went, but I would have really liked to see, I guess, that end sequence. I would have liked to see Emma Watson as Annie get a chance to shine in all of her, you know, dorky glory that makes her very much her character. So it was weird to see them kind of pass that up in the end. But for the rest of it,
you can see why it's obviously more exciting to see people to visually almost getting murdered by a plant other than. I mean, what are you going to do? Just zoom in on her face as she's trying to remember, or doing flashbacks to a class? It's going to be super cheesy, right? Some of the cinematography was done pretty well. I think it gave. There was one shot of Neville having to like look up at one of the teachers. I thought was done really well. The sets were beautiful. I mean, the opening to the Great Hall was magnificent.
I very much like that. I really appreciate the shot when they're all kind of on those dingy little rowboats going over the Great Lake, and they all have the lamppost sitting there, and then in the back, I mean, it's an iconic shot, but I think that does a really, really good job showing how you can make CGI, depth of field, and also utilizing small pieces of light to really create a kind of dark atmosphere. I feel like that is one of the best, not dark shots in tone, but literally visually dark shots that pulls focus incredibly well. I would have liked to see, and this is a whole gripe, I'll constantly bring it up almost every single video, I'm sure I'll bring it up. I don't know why they didn't put a giant squid in the lake. There's so many cool parts. They could have had the giant squid coming out of the lake, and I feel like that shot specifically could have had like a big old tentacle or something.
Sure.
But that shot in particular, it really kind of brings everything home for him. Like, Harry at this point has seen a cool hallway or a cool alley that has a bunch of magical items, but when they're going across that, Hagrid's taking them across on the boat and they're seeing the big old castle, it's kind of that, oh shit, like this is for real moment, and they do it very, very well. To that, don't let me forget, there's something specifically about Hagrid I want to talk about, but...
Well, what I was thinking is that, and this is the writing of the book as well, I wanted to try to focus on the movie, but I couldn't help but think the entire plot of this thing hinges on Hagrid being an idiot.
Yeah.
Every single main plot point, like the main plot wouldn't happen. The main villain wouldn't be able to get the information if Hagrid just didn't go around saying things he wasn't supposed to say.
I feel like maybe I'm misremembering because, like I said, at this point I have watched quite a few movies in succession and further in the series. But this is the one where he constantly says,
I wasn't supposed to say that.
I shouldn't have tell you that. Yeah, it feels like such a cheap way because specifically when they're talking about Norbert and the little dragon that he gets, that's the whole crux to figure out that Quirrell was able to, find the Sorcerer's Stone and learn how to get past Fluffy. But instead of using that very smart way of how they did in the book, they kind of use Hagrid as, just the big old dumb oaf, which Hagrid has tinges of that, but the whole idea is that Hagrid's courageous, he's very brave, but he's smart, and Dumbledore trusts him. And I felt that it was kind of a betrayal to the character to just make him go, oh, I should have told you that, like some big old dumb idiot that doesn't know. Like, he wouldn't realize his mistake only seconds after he made it. So I agree with you completely on that part.
Yeah, I think they sold him out big time, and it was just a way for them to get through it a little quicker. I mean, there are just some things it's very hard to translate from a book into a film. I mean, real quick side note, Dune, the book Dune is all about character thoughts, right? And you saw when David Lynch tried to make that film, and it was all this horrible voiceover. But anyways,
David Lynch, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, but I'd say wrapping it up, this was a really successful adaptation of it. I think one of the best in the series as far as I can remember, and
I'll be interested. I'll be interested to see when we're finally done with all this. I just want to just as a closing remark.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna do all of these. What do you think because you haven't seen, anything past 1 at this point. What do you think your favorite and least favorite are going to be? I'm wondering where they're gonna line up in the end, but because Sorcerer's Stone is towards the bottom of my list, in fact. But what do you think, like, top and bottom, if you had to call it, just based off of, like, bullshit memory, what do you think?
From my memory, I remember Azkaban I really liked because it got darker. Goblet of Fire was the worst. 2 was not very strong. 1 was a great standalone kids movie. And then I thought 5, 6, 7A, and 7B went back to the well of let's make this darker. And I remember really liking them like kind of embracing that horror again. So I mean, I would put Azkaban and 5 to the last one in the same group. 4 awful, 1 good, but one feels so different in the way that it's just this.
It does. And that's the thing, is that it gets so dark and so much its own thing that one feels almost like its own entire experience. There's a very jovial joyness to it that you don't really get from anything past 2.
Yeah, I think it's the most balanced out of them all, and in a way, I think it is the best, because I could recommend this to anybody. They wouldn't have to have read the books. They wouldn't have to have seen, well, obviously you don't have to see the other movies to see the first one, but I think overall, it's the strongest. The latter ones, they go at it from a different angle. They're a bit more mature. They are like a lot darker and more horror themed. But
they're not trying to establish a story, really.
Yeah. But I think they kind of forget some of the fun adventure, the magic of it.
Yeah, specifically, no. I mean, a lot of Harry Potter is about the true magic of the situation, not just the fact they're dealing with magic. And I think in that regard, one feels the most magical, the most joy-filled, the most childlike, in a good way.
Understand this, Harry, because it's very important. Not all wizards are good.
So, Hagrid specifically, they did a camera trick to make the actor look tall. You can notice this in any singular Hagrid shot. It's always kind of, the camera's down here, you're looking up, giving you that scale perspective. Now, I don't know if they didn't bother with CGI or what the deal was, but as I guess kind of a little quest for our viewers, if you're interested in going back and watching it, feel some nostalgia, the version I watched, which I believe is the director's cut, any scene that has Hagrid in a shot big enough to contain his entire body, they used a stand-in. Now, normally stand-ins, they try to hide their face, they try to, make it difficult to tell it's a stand-in. There is at least 3 scenes in Sorcerer's Stone where they linger on the stand-in's face for at least 2 to 3 seconds. Specifically speaking, and I'll give you a hint as the first one, it takes place in the scene where Hagrid first meets Harry when he's a kid. He tells him, "You're a wizard, Harry." In that whole sequence, there's a spot. But when I saw this stand-in, he couldn't have looked further from, in the face, the actual actor. And I had to pause the movie and go back and just, did I have a glitch in the Matrix moment or something there? So if you go back and you watch it, try and find the 3 spots in which the Hagrid stand-in is just directly in the middle of the frame, because if anything, it's good for some laughs. It's kind of crazy just how big of a budget production this was, and that one glaring issue was in there. So I'm not 100% sure if it's in the theatrical cut or if I just came across it in the director's cut, but it's a glaring issue and it's hilarious. Did you catch him by any chance?
Not at all. I was watching with my girlfriend though, and normally I like to watch movies like this with some headphones and a laptop, but I decided it would be fun to put it on the big screen TV. But fortunately, that meant my girlfriend was there distracting me, and her mom was like puttering around. So it was
pottering.
Yeah. So it was,
but yeah, no, that was definitely a high note, just as a meta joke for my Sorcerer's Stone viewing. Just that, the first scene came up and I was like, what? And then, as it continued, there's multiple spots. So it becomes this fun little scavenger hunt, like spot the stand-in when he should obviously not be front facing the camera. It's a pretty fun little thing to do.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining me, Matthew O. Thanks everybody for checking it out. We're going to be covering every film in the series. We also cover
every single one.
That's right. And we cover brand new movies. Like before, we talked about Beauty and the Beast. Some interesting ones coming up. Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm sure we'll both be watching.
I'm 100% there for Guardians. Got Fast and the Furious, maybe? Who knows?
Maybe. If I find somebody fun to go watch that with, I'll check it out. So you can check us out on 90skid.com. You can find me on Twitter at GameThinkTalk. And Matt?
You can find me at SuperGamecast64, or if you want to listen to my podcast, SuperGamecast64 on iTunes and Stitcher.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Share it with somebody if you can. It really helps. Bye for now.
I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed. Or worse, expelled.
She needs to sort out her priorities.
I think it is clear that we can expect great things from you.